And how we're going to start the panel off is we're each going to spend a couple minutes giving our perspectives, and then we'll open up the floor to you. Stephanie, you're first.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for coming, and for those that were able to stay after, hopefully in the time that we have left, we'll have a very engaging discussion about what we've seen and what we've heard. Lots of thoughts going through me right now, lots of thoughts after seeing this. This was a lot of revelation, a lot of truth being shown here. I can honestly say I'm appalled, I'm ashamed, I'm saddened. And for today, you can call me an angry black woman, okay? What I want to do is just sort of share some thoughts that I have from my perspective of having been a television news reporter. Primarily, that's when the thoughts of how women are perceived in the media began to really influence me. And then being on the other side as media relations manager, it just sort of has resonated and grown in terms of my interest. I want to read with you real quickly, if I could, just a poem that I wrote. And this is when I transitioned after having been a television reporter and having had to maintain a certain look. I decided I'm now free to be me. And I wrote a poem just sort of that sort of highlights those thoughts. Do you see me? Do you see who I really am? Or do you see the person who I want you to see? Full of life, love, laughing hysterically? Do you see me? Do you see who I really am? Or do you see the person who I want to be? Strong, independent, approaching life daringly. Go ahead, take a look. Take a long look. Do you see my tightly coiled, kinky hair? You know, the hair that causes you to try not to stare? No longer straight, smooth, and shiny, swinging in the wind like so. And oh, do you see my full lips and wide nose? They stand out in a crowd, you know. And the imperfections in my skin clue you in on the time of month and sometimes the amount of stress I'm in. Not to mention my sometimes bulging stomach and my curvaceous hips. Not quite the hourglass figure you were looking for. Just remember what I said about my nose and my lips. But you know, it's okay, it's all good really. Because you see, when I see me, I see a beautiful black queen, one who is regal and divine. This hair, nose, stomach, and these hips, I love them because they are mine. When I step into a room, all eyes are on me, not because I'm a supermodel, but because of my unique beauty. Do you see me? Can you see who I really am? No, I may not be what you wanted me to be, society's prescription of beauty, but can we simply agree that I am who God created me to be? Thanks. So, in thinking about some of the themes of this particular documentary, you know, whether we as women realize it or not, we do. We tend to evaluate ourselves based on appearance because that's how we believe that others judge us. We've actually allowed society to dictate that wide hips and big lips aren't sexy unless it's on a Kardashian. So for me, the question then becomes, what does beauty actually look like? You know, beauty looks like you. It looks like you, it looks like you, it looks like me, quite honestly. But you wouldn't know that when you take in the messages and the images that the media puts out there. After an hour of watching television, I would swear that I'm not good enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not sexy enough, that my education doesn't mean much. I would also be led to believe that my voice, my opinions, my self-worth, my value, things that matter most to me, they are rarely ever going to be heard. After 4 or 5 hours of watching television, Boy, I am sure thankful that I avoided being a teen mom. I'm asking myself, how can I marry a millionaire and become a real housewife living near the Jersey Shore in a real world? When will enough be enough? When will we as women, we as society tire of not just seeing but accepting these images? My perspective on things, as Cindy pointed out, is a little different because I was in the media. I was a news reporter. And certainly at that time, I thought I was going to change the world. As a black woman, I felt a lot of pressure. Not just the pressure of being talented, but the pressure of what was it to be acceptable, to have an acceptable look as a black woman on television. I was signing up, as you know, for a very visual medium. I wore weaves so that I could wear long tresses. I straightened my hair. I colored it various shades of blonde. I obsessed about gaining weight. At that time in the business, that was back in the 90s, there was a certain look that news directors were drawn to for their black female anchors. It was the fairer-skinned black woman with long flowing hair. I wasn't that woman. So I often wondered about my changes of ever becoming a news anchor, and while I wasn't that particular black woman, I also wasn't being my authentic self. I was constantly trying to conform. And I was conforming to the standards of, quite honestly, at that time, what happened to be the predominant nature of things were white male news directors who felt they knew what was beautiful for their viewing audiences. And so stepping aside from race just a moment, women in television news in general have a tough road to travel. Their longevity in the business is not the same as a man's. Just the other day, a colleague of mine sent me a web link to a news report, and he was very excited about that news report, but in the message, he said to me, be sure you watch the male anchor. He has been the male anchor since before I was in high school. Now, not to give away the age of my colleague, but that's 20 plus years. Female anchors are rarely ever afforded that same luxury. And so now that I'm out of the business and on the other side, I tend to watch television and movies with a different, a more critical eye. And the things that I see, the things that were pointed out in this particular documentary, the statistics, they're maddening. And so again, I ask the question, when will enough be enough?
Thank you, Stephanie. And that poem, I think, is a powerful testimony to sort of what we in the media face when it comes to the typing and I mean, I got into this business because people noticed that I had a nice voice, and that got me. And by the way, I should say, thank you for introducing me as a voice, but Cynthia, I have a face, you know. I'm just kidding. But that's part of it, and then, you know, and it turned out, I think I had a mind, and we married the two, as it turned out. In fact, in watching, this is the first time I've seen this film, and I was absolutely delighted at the focus that it took, because after seeing all of the images and all of the statistics, it was hard for me to know where to start. And I think I'll start where the film did, with the epigraph by Alice Walker, because I think that's the focus of the film. The most common way people give up power is to think they never had it. There is a deliberate effort on the part of corporate America, which is controlled through and by corporate commercial media, to make you feel powerless. It does two things. It makes you need to buy things to get power, and it makes you a docile employee who will never challenge the unethical and unscrupulous practices of the corporation that controls your time. It is deliberate. It is not an accident. They talked here about, well, we need arresting images. We need to somehow get your attention. And yes, a woman in lingerie bleeding from every orifice and from orifices recently made will get your attention. But I have to tell you that a young girl looking at a puppy will also get your attention. You will look at a mother, or a father for that matter, gazing at their newborn baby. You'll look. It will get your attention. There is a deliberate effort to keep you anxious, because anxiety has a number, and Dr. Bulik can tell you more than I, of results. It can result in violent behavior, it can result in abusive behavior, self-abuse, depression, and the need to buy things. So it's still, here's the joke. There's a joke, and it came to mind watching this film. This guy is a customs inspector, and his job is to, watch things go across the border. And a guy comes up with a wheelbarrow full of sand. And he's looking at the guy, and he's looking at the sand, and he runs his fingers through, and he looks, and there's nothing. Lets him go. The guy comes back the next day. There's the wheelbarrow, there's the sand. Turns it over, looks through it, puts it all back, finds nothing, sends him on his way. This happens every day for years. Can't find anything, lets him go. Customs inspector retires. A few years later, he's sitting at a bar. In comes the guy with the wheelbarrow. He says, I gotta know. I can't do anything to you. I'm retired, but I gotta know, what were you smuggling? Guy says, wheelbarrows. That's what's going on here. What's going on here is messages that support TV programs that are designed to support the products that they sell, all of which are useless products. You have to feel somehow useless yourself in order to go buy these things, because really, food and love, kind of is all we need. 60 billion of those dollars, of the 256 billion, are spent on the fast food, are in food industry, not all fast food. Selling food. $60 billion to tell you you're hungry. We're serious. So you have to buy a certain kind of food. So I'm gonna leave it at that. But I do believe that this is deliberate, and I do believe that we are not necessarily. So there's a deliberate effort to make us feel powerless. All right, one more note. Ivan the Terrible. You may have heard of him. Famous for his tyrannical rule of Russia and also building a Russian empire. And you wonder, how do tyrants stay in office? But how do they do it? And here's a guy who, he had a secret police. He started the kind of proto-KGB, and he had a military, and all of those were effective in keeping him in office. But there were a couple of million Russians at the time, and he was brutal. Even by contemporary standards, he was brutal. How did he stay in? How did not a couple of thousand of them just overwhelm the guard and murder the guy? Ivan the Terrible, at the very beginning of his reign, drove a pike through the head of his son. He killed his son with a spear. At that moment, every parent in Russia enforced the regime of Ivan the Terrible. That's how it works. That's how it worked in the good old days of tyranny and dictatorship. We're now post-dictatorship, we're post-totalitarianism, and we are post-democracy. We're now a corporatocracy. And the way to enforce that these days is not to drive a pike through the head of your son, but to convince each and every one of you that you are powerless against a system that you neither understand, nor individually, and any tiny group that you can form, have any power against it. So conform and buy something to make yourself feel better. No, that's it.
Well, thanks to both Frank and Stephanie for your perspectives. And mine is very different because I'm not in the media. I'm on the media a bunch, but I'm not in the media. And what I thought about doing is just reflecting on how this film has dovetailed with my experience in the last 2 weeks, which has been about as maddening as watching this film. So every night for the past 2 weeks, I've watched Jon Stewart, and I've watched him catalog the new venues in which men were making unilateral and often humiliating decisions about women's health care. Sort of fits with the movie. Then, Over the last 2 weeks, I listened to whom I called the candidate who shall not be named, reminding us where women belong and what marriage should be, and many other things that we should believe in. I was then assaulted yet again by another round of debates among, and I apologize, among older white men. And I don't include Frank in that because, as you know, he was born that way. Old and white. But then these debates were later very superficially discussed by scantily clad Fox Barbies, which I call them. And now those scantily clad Barbies have gone out of Fox and the cable networks and are on the morning shows as well. To be honest, I mean, I'm a scientist, so I always have to get up here and like moderate what I say and, you know, cite citations and stuff, but today I get to actually have opinions. So I'm actually enraged. I am enraged that my daughters have to grow up with this and are being exposed to these throwback trends which our foremothers worked so hard to overcome. It blows my mind that we're back here. And what really blows my mind is instead of burning our bras, we seem to be out spending $50 on Victoria's Secret push-up bras. Shouldn't do that. That's one of the things at the end of the movie we've got to stop doing. Say no to the big corporations. From my perspective, what I'm seeing is that women have lost their collective voice. There doesn't seem to be a female agenda anymore. We're not out campaigning for women's issues. We're campaigning for the Tea Party or the Republican Party or occasionally for the Democratic Party. What this actually means is that women have been divided and conquered, and that doesn't help us regain that collective voice. Really good article in the newspaper today in the News and Observer by Ron Christensen. He said, "Women in Tar Heel politics learned long ago that the way to get ahead was to pretend to be one of the guys. We can't do that anymore. That might be a way to get ahead in a man's world, sort of, kind of, but it's not the way to make the world our own." We've lived through 3 waves of feminism, and what do we really have to show for it? Frankly, and I think this is the part that we as women have to take responsibility for, the 4th wave of feminism is in our own minds. We have to keep fighting these external battles, as you saw in the film, battles for equal pay for equal work, battles for women's health care, battles for getting a prenatal policy and appropriate support for breastfeeding and childcare. But an equally important battle is inside our own heads. We have to remain utterly convinced that we are worthy of equality. We have to stop caving into big fashion, big diet, big cosmetics, and all of the other bigs that not only tell us we are powerless, but tell us there's something wrong with us. Their best advertising strategy is to make you feel as if there's something wrong with you, and then to offer you a solution to it if only you pay them money. And then they say, not only will that boost your body esteem, but it'll boost your self-esteem as well. Get them out of your heads. So the messages, here are messages. You have to be thin, no blemishes, heard that before. You have to be blonde. Stephanie tried that. Can't see you as a blonde. No cellulite. Wear specific brands of clothes or shoes, and God forbid, and this is my demographic, never age. Aging is not cool. Don't do it. What these things are, what the bigs put in your head, are mind worms. They're horrible mind worms, and they're mind worms that are basically modern-day foot binding that rob us of our individuality and divert our attention from achieving all that women can achieve. Without the belief that we deserve to be equal, everything that women have accomplished in the past will remain in the past and will continue along this disheartening throwback path. So that's us. Now let's hear from you. Comments, questions, anything from the audience, and we're all here to take any questions you might have. We have roaming microphones. Let's get your microphone so we can get you on tape.
Get you on tape, yeah.
Do we organize on a neighborhood basis? We need men here. It needs to not just be women who
All
are
the Y
trying to
chromosomes in the
organize it.
room. Raise your hand if you have a Y chromosome. That means if you're a guy. Woohoo!
We need to be extremely concerned about the way women were cut out of the process of voting in terms of who we had in our houses of Congress, and I am absolutely incensed over where I see things going. I will do anything I can to try to not only help with what's going on here, but not lose ground of how hard, as me as a 62-year-old woman, tried to get to where we are here now. Thank you.
I think, that was definitely a question that I had after reading this. What can I do? What do we do? How are we going to solve this? And, at the end of the film, it did bring up a few points that I think were something that we can hold on to. Mentoring. How many of us are mentors? How many of us are actually reaching back and reaching out to help? That's one thing. Supporting other women. I mean, it sounds so basic, but are we really doing that? Are we being catty and choosing to judge from head to toe when a woman walks in a room? Are we supporting her in her effort to do whatever? Those are the things that I think the end of this film pointed out, and writing our own stories. That's how we get our voice heard, by writing our own stories. Not his story, but our story.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. I think at the individual level, we all have to see how they're brilliantly driving wedges. In this state, 1898, the uncontested coup d'etat in Wilmington, North Carolina, sent a message that poor people, black and white, will not get together, or they will be in mortal danger. And that was a powerful message. So driving a wedge and separating people is a key. When 1% of the population owns 40% of the wealth, they got to come up with something clever. So I think you're right. But then the other, I think, at the larger scale, we need to consider the most effective political strategy in the 20th century, which was nonviolent resistance. Nonviolent resistance ended the British Raj in India. It ended Jim Crow in the South, and it brought down totalitarianism in Eastern Europe. It is by far the most effective, and World War II, for all of its blessings, and it ended some real horrors, set up the Cold War, in which millions more people died. So violent resistance has a checkered history. Nonviolent resistance pretty much bats 1,000. And the essence of that is non-participation. We must strike and we must boycott. We can no longer participate in the system that drives a wedge and tries to bring so much violence to our own lives.
I'm going to add one thing to this about how loud your voice can be if you raise it together with others. And I think we are not alone in this. And just yesterday and today, something really amazing happened, and seeing the Disney CEO just brought this to mind. Disney came out with this program called Habit Heroes, and it was all about allegedly fighting childhood obesity and getting kids to eat in a more healthful way. In this program, they had these avatars with names like Lead Bottom and other horrible names. It was basically just fodder to tell kids how they can tease other kids who are having weight challenges. And it was things like you would go around with broccoli and shoot a hot dog. I mean, it was weird, it was ill-conceived, it was stigmatizing, and it was shaming. We were irate. The eating disorders in the obesity community went crazy on Twitter, on Facebook, calling Disney. We went up there yesterday morning, site down for maintenance. Somebody got through to the CEO of Disney. Exactly. And they're probably going to come back, but they're going to come back with something, and they're going to ask us first before they put it up there. So alone, I couldn't have done anything, but with thousands of other activists in the eating disorder and the health community, we got them to do it. So never think your voice is alone. Find a community with a shared voice and join in, because it's a good feeling. It's community.
While you're waiting, this system, this particular form of consumer capitalism requires 3% gross annual growth. If you threaten that, if you, by not buying the products, bring that number below 3%, it starves to death. And it will dissolve and, through the process of creative destruction, reinvent itself in our image. I'm sorry, you had a question?
Hey, Cindy, I'm Tommy, and you know I got a Y chromosome. I think I want to add to what you just said, Cindy, in the beginning about your battles. I think there also needs to be a battle of body image within the media. I'm sorry, but Britney Spears, after she had her child, comes on MTV and sings at the MTV Music Awards, and she was criticized for what? Being too fat. She just had a kid. And that drives me absolutely insane. The thing that gets me right now is, what's that going to do whenever people become middle age? And how does that affect it? And I want to know if you'd expand on that, Cindy, right now with the media, or what that does.
Thanks for the question, Tommy. I think one of the things that we heard is, at least in the media, women don't become middle age. You know, they're out of there by the time they cross that magic 40 line. So I think that's part of what the media solution is to middle age. I'm with you 100%. Adele is another one who's gone very vocal about her size. Karl Lagerfeld, the designer, went whack job on her about her size. And she just sort of came back and she was like, I'm not a model, I'm a singer. You know, it was like, it's all about her voice, it's not about her body. I was like, yes, you go, girl. But what we see on TV doesn't reflect the world at all. It's like we're watching TV about like this alien planet where these people look really differently than we do as a population. You know, and again, I think, to get back to Frank's point, it has to do with what we consume. Why do we keep watching this stuff? Why do we buy this stuff? You know, Brigitte magazine, which is a magazine in Germany, took a really bold move, and they stopped using models in their publication. And the doomsayers said that their sales were going to just plummet, and they were just basically going to lose their magazine. Didn't happen. Women swarmed to the magazine. They loved seeing people who looked more like them. It was a great experiment, but it hasn't generalized. So again, this is one of those situations where we need some collective voice, and frankly, we need guys to talk about it too, just like you did today, Tommy, so that the voices that we're hearing are from both sexes, and being clear that we all care about this and we all want change.
And when we do, and I think the movie made the point very, very well, when we do reflect average folk, right, folk on the street, it tends to be in a criminal situation. You see, this is not an accident. There's a lot of ways that we could present normal body types, a wide range of body types, and a wide range of human and American experience that would sell. There's no doubt that it would sell. There's a deliberate effort to sell a particular kind of image. So if we go into poor neighborhoods, we'll criminalize everybody in there. Cops come in, guy's in his underpants, he's overweight, he's drunk, he's beating his wife, he's mating with a chicken, who knows what. And that's deliberate. We're going to reinforce the image that those people in that, you can see them, we'll reflect them. There seems to be an appetite to see something that looks like us, so we'll show them, but they're all criminals and we got to throw them in jail and they're no good unless they're in handcuffs. I mean, it's deliberate.
And when you look at reality television, that's, you know, sort of goes along that same line. I mean, these producers, directors, writers, whomever, are putting folks in a box, right? This kind of woman who looks this kind of way should act this kind of way. If she's a blonde, if she's brunette, if she's black, she's whatever. And that's scary. That is frightening, because reality television isn't declining, it's increasing. I just saw some other show that's coming out called Brooklyn. I mean, it's maddening, but again, if we stop consuming these things, perhaps they would go away.
The thing in the products they advertise. and make it clear to the advertiser you've stopped watching and you're not buying the product.
There was this show on TV that had a woman president, lasted a year. We were watching that show. I think we were watching that show. So that's hard to fight. Where did that go?
But we can use our voice in a supportive way as well. I betcha if we had gotten as many people who protested the Disney program to write in and say, we love this show, keep it going, and if we got some men to say that as well, and that's gaming the system a little bit, but if we sprinkle a little bit of Y chromosome opinion in there, it just, maybe all the Ys who are receiving will hear it more. But seriously, don't just sit back and expect the right thing to happen. If you like something, say out loud you like it, and if you don't like something, say out loud with a bunch of people you don't like it. We have to be active to change, because the world sure ain't going to change by itself.
Okay, so in media a lot, women are, or like in life in general, women are put in a double bind where they can't show emotion, because either if they don't show emotion or don't cry or whatever, they're like a cold-hearted bitch. But if they do cry, it's just that's what, women are expected to cry, and that's normal, that's just a woman being weak or whatever. What advice would you have for young women who struggle between when to show emotion and when to be strong, and kind of fight between the two?
That's a great question. And I'm going to go off the reservation for a second and just talk about something related, because did you see the guy up there who was talking about how we can't have a woman in the White House because of the PMS and the mood swings? That just tells me how little he understands about female reproductive biology, because normally by the time you become president, you're about, what, 50 years old or something like that, or more? Them women are postmenopausal. They're not having PMS anymore. So he was so wrong. But anyhow, I think it's a really important point, and part of it has to do with the emotional constipation of, they were talking about, of guys. I was sitting over, I've watched this movie way too many times, and still, at 3 different times during this movie, I started crying. When Stephanie said her poem, I started crying. And it's I wasn't up here blubbering, and my notes didn't get, all messed up because of tears or anything, but I was tearing up. That's appropriate emotion. This stuff is appropriate. It's appropriate to have that kind of response. But, we have to be all, professional. There's nothing wrong with showing the fact that something leads you to emote. That's part of who we are. Thank you. And I actually think that one of the things about why those boards that they were talking about make such good decisions when they have women on them is because they allow emotion into the conversation. We don't have to completely compartmentalize our intellectual selves from our emotional selves. In fact, when they're integrated and they're informing each other, that's when the really good decisions come out. And we can help guys. We can really model for them that this works out okay. It's not a sign of weakness. It's actually sort of a sign of superiority. Did I say that out loud? Yeah, but it is, because it's kind of hard to do. It's not easy to go back and forth between emoting and being intellectual. But when you can do that effectively, you get some darn interesting solutions. I know Frank can do that. That's why I said.
Well, here's the interesting thing. You want to talk about control of the media and how the media, commercial media, have controlled the message. When we say emotion, what we're talking about is tears, sadness, compassion. That's the bad thing. Because anger is an emotion. And Bill O'Reilly and Chris Matthews and all of Fox News and a lot of the rest of the media that now ape them make a living by showing men who are angry, and that is appropriate. There's no problem with men being angry. Anger is an emotion. That's the good one, because men have it. Compassion, tears, bad emotion. Why? Because if I feel compassionate for the people in Nigeria whose oil Shell is taking without compensating them, and I start to feel a certain sympathy for them, I might make that oil company stop doing what it's doing. That's a dangerous emotion. Compassion is a very dangerous emotion when it comes to trying to maintain control.
Wouldn't it be terrible if we made those decisions based on compassion?
Based on, by
Yeah.
our sense that we cannot live without the human beings who are among us, whose faces we may not know, whose names we don't know, and yet we can't live without them. How about a world where we truly believe that and live that way? That would scare the devil out of, a lot of boards of directors would figure out a new way to maintain control if we all got together on that one.
Hi, I wanted to thank everyone for putting this together. My question is, so I'm a scientist, I'm a feminist, I'm all these things. I mentor young girls in 4th grade, and I really struggle with finding like-minded voices. And it's amazing that everyone's here and feels this way. So I guess my question would be, it seems to what we need is something really, really big, and that's what this film is promoting. We need a lot of people to get together and make change. So how do you do that? I mean, on a larger scale.
I think a larger scale is often seeded by lots of smaller scales. That's sort of what we're doing here today, and that's what this film is trying to get people to do around the nation, is just start, small groups of people developing solutions that work for them, and then sort of exporting, morphing, whatever you have to do, and then it's sort of like snowballs. And you always start at home. Starting at home is a really effective strategy. And hopefully some things are going to come out of this, and some things are going to come out of this week and of this film that will really kickstart some of those movements.
And I guess one of the points would be, too, is, when you leave here, don't stop talking about this film. Don't stop talking about the things that people are speaking about today. I think that's very, very important because we can lose sight quickly to get wrapped up into our day-to-day lives and forget what's important. The truths that were spoken in this documentary are what is important.
Yeah, and show this film. I mean, have dinner parties. This is interesting because this is a social event, which is nice. We're all together in a room. You can do this in 1,000 living rooms all across the triangle.
I'm a dietitian nutritionist. I work with eating disorders for many, many years. And just in thinking about one little thing, when I say think small, in my own life with my own kids, as they were growing up, and I could see all these really negative influences. And one of the things that we just always had a policy in our family that we don't talk negatively at home, among ourselves, or anywhere else about people's bodies. And so as my kids grew and their friends would be out with us and they would be making comments about someone that not only is too obese, but someone who's too thin. And my daughter would pop up and say, well, I'm sorry, we don't make comments like that about people's body, it's our policy. And it was startling. There are many startling moments with friends who just said, oh, okay. And I think that's how one little tiny way that we can begin, which can be powerful, is that in our own friends' circles, they can stop having those negative influences. So.
Hallelujah. I completely agree. And it is neat how it ends up not being a big deal. It's like, we don't do that in our house. Oh, okay, that's fine, move on. Going one step deeper, it's also what you think. One of the things that I deal with a lot in the book is us not being aware enough of how often we say disparaging things in our own minds about people who are different. In any way, too wide, too thin, too tall, too short, we always comment on things that aren't clustered right around the mean. And part of it really starts with just monitoring your own internal commentary and saying, why am I saying that? Where did that come from? Would you ever ask yourself the question, would you ever walk up to that person and say it to them face to face? And if no, then don't think stuff like that anymore, because it's not kind. And to take it even one step further, if you do the same thing to yourself when you look in the mirror, you might want to edit that as well, because you're being just as disrespectful and unkind to yourself as you are to that other person.
My name is Jen, and I went to UNC for undergrad and graduate school, and now I live in the area and I'm a scientist. And I see a lot of the ways that this film is replicated in the workplace. Now that I work at a professional engineering company, there are very few women scientists there. I'm 29 years old, I have my own house, I have a great career, I'm not married, I don't have any children, and unfortunately, often at work, my personal life becomes the focus instead of my professional life. I am a principal investigator on million-dollar grants, and instead of sending me to conferences, they often train a marketing person and send her to talk about our projects instead, because she is more visually acceptable. And seeing that is sad, and I feel sad for some of the women who are yet to experience that in real life. UNC acts as a bit of a buffer, because we have such great liberal minds here, and it makes me angry. And I want to change that for my future daughters and sisters and friends. And I'd like to ask you, Cynthia, Frank, and Stephanie, what you think we can do to change the perception of women in the workplace so that we are valued for our minds and not commented on about our bodies.
Thank you so much for sharing that personal story. And I'm really heartened to hear that you went from sad to angry, because I was sitting here steaming, and I was like, we got to get to the angry part here. That's infuriating and appalling and all those other words. And please don't wait for the next generation. Would you say you were 29? You got some time. Let's get this fixed now. Please don't wait. I mean, I think you need to address it. You're the PI, and say, can you explain to me, please, your decision behind sending her and not me, given that I'm the PI? Please help me understand. I mean, the number of times in my career when I've had to say, please help me understand, in situations like this, because something was blatantly wrong, and I knew that if I went like straight front and center and took my sort of like feminist flag or pierced someone in the eye, that wasn't going to solve a problem. But the help me understand part at least got the conversation going. The other thing you can do is find some allies in your workplace. It doesn't sound like there are a lot of them, but there might be some men. Don't just look, like they were saying, don't just look for the women. There might be some guys who are like, yeah, I think you should go. You're the PI. No one is saying this is easy. It's not. It is a daily battle. You just don't know where the slings and arrows are going to come from that you're going to have to fight next. But it always comes down to just staying centered and being absolutely clear internally that you know what's right and wrong. And when an injustice like this is happening, even if it's to you or to someone else, then feeling just really justified and empowered to go after it. Good luck.
Well, I guess the only thing that I would definitely say is, you have to challenge the system. And as easy as that sounds, it's not. It's very, very tough. And I think finding mentors, as Dr. Bulik said, is key. But I think you do have to feel empowered to speak up for yourself, because really, who's going to speak up for you? And that's tough, in corporate America, a woman who speaks up, who's assertive, there are all these other labels then that are attached to her. And does that prevent her from rising to the top? In a lot of cases, it does. I have to watch that in the circles and the environments that I'm in when I speak, that I don't come across as an angry black woman. I'm not angry, I'm just asking a question. So it is a challenge. There's a fine balance that you've got to try to maneuver. All the best to you in that. definitely.
Hi, my name is Ivy Hooper, and I wanted to thank everyone for their comments. And I wanted to also just piggyback on a couple of those comments regarding whether we're mentoring for our children or our children's children, whether we are trying to support each other as sisters across all of our various differences, or whether we are trying to personally, in a vacuum, hold ourselves accountable when we look in the mirror. Those things are really challenging to do in isolation. And someone over there said, what do we do now? Where do we go? And my question is, how do we start work groups? Do we try to use the media? Do we have a collaborative group that starts to meet as a discussion group? And then resources. This woman is dealing with this in isolation on her job. How do we pull in, not just mentors, but folks who are willing to be resources? How do we make use of the ACLU? How do we make use of other women attorneys who might want to support a work group or discussion group by saying, hey, that's illegal and these are your rights? How do we support, as mental health clinicians like myself, and saying, these are the ways that you can sort of cognitively change the tapes that are running in your head about who you are and about your worth? How do we pull in folks from the community to support a group that wants to gather, that wants to move forward as a collective voice?
Hi, I'm Ellen Morrison. I'm a registered dietitian and certified eating disorder specialist. I teach all the things to my clients as you have in your book, Cindy, and I thank you for publishing that and all the other studies and having this event today with your team. What do we do now? We have to get together. We can't just stay here and say, what do we do, what do we do? We have to get together as a group. I work in Raleigh, and I am willing to put together a group if you're willing to join me, and let's start working on this. Because we can talk to her blue in the face, but until we start taking action, nothing's going to change. And I'm willing to take that role.
Woo-hoo! Round of applause. Before you start, how do we do that? What's our first step? You're going to come down here and you're going to give us, we're going to have this, we need to do this. Sign-in sheets, Twitter, Facebook, social media, face-to-face, the whole 9 yards.
No yogurt without your email.
That's right, no yogurt. Nobody gets any yogurt until we have your email address.
Well, you're welcome to come up after me, see me after the discussion, and let's exchange emails, names, and let's put a meeting together and discuss where do we start. You know, I'm not exactly sure how we start after we get the group together, but we've got a lot of brilliant people in this room, and I'm sure that we can figure it out.
If you're on Facebook, we have the Facebook page where everyone was invited to come to this event. So, do you have a Facebook? Yes? Okay, did you get that invite? Maybe. We'll send it to you. But that's another place where we could all come together and meet and share contact information.
My name's Ann. I'd like to just request that we begin thinking about this not as a battle. I just don't like perpetuating this military metaphor for everything. And go back more to what you said about community building. If we're 51%, that's the majority. Let's use our power. And not in a violent way, not in a battle type mentality. Gathering support. I went to this university in the late 60s and I took a class in political science, and we talked about how women were being portrayed. And they made us listen to the music of Tammy Wynette singing Stand By Your Man. And we had grown up in the 50s, so we saw a different kind of media woman in the 50s. But it wasn't who we were. And all the women who were my friends in college 3 of us have written books. 1 has gotten an Emmy. 1 stars in theater performances all the time. Another one, vice president of a bank. Then she went into business for herself. I've been self-employed for 34 years. We've done it. Y'all can do it too. You really can. They are not in charge of who we are.
And that circle of ladies that you just talked about sound like they'd be wonderful mentors for younger women. They probably all are, right? Yeah, yeah.
Well, my name is Margie, and first of all, I'd like to thank my husband for coming with me to this because it was close. One thing that I've noticed, I'm a nurse, and I've been in 2 different fields. I've been in the medical field, and now I'm in the psychiatric field, mental health. And when I was in the medical field, I don't see this so much now, but as far as the way like drug reps represent the drugs out there, 9 times out of 10 you're going to see a beautiful, just like the Fox chicks. You know, they'll come in and they're gorgeous, and I'm not downplaying any of them because they've got a job to do and families and stuff like that too. But it's all about how good they look. And patients have noticed it. So they would come in and say, I guess I'm going to have to wait since the pretty blonde is out there wanting to talk to the doctor about the medicines. And that just used to make me sick because I would see how the doctors would respond to that. Even ones that were very, not like that in general, but it just happens, and you can see, and even the men who come in have to be all suave and stuff like that. But then I got to really thinking that I felt sorry for them in a way, people who have to bank on that beauty or whatever to be in a certain position, because it really made me think. At the time, I was in the throes of an eating disorder at that point. Okay, and so in that time, I'm thinking, there are these beautiful women and blah, 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 blah. But then I'm thinking, I feel like I'm the luckier one because without being this ravishing thing, I'm at least going to know that people are looking at me for me, or talking to me, or marrying me, or whatever, and listening to what I have to say, and not just because you've got the looks or whatever. And that sells, and it's really sad and sickening. Now, in mental health, we don't see that as much. We don't see as many drug reps, for one thing, and the ones that come in are gorgeous, but you don't see all of this, because most of the doctors and therapists there are women, but and the men who are there are very open to, they're much more mentally healthy. Just an observation. And thank you for doing this, because this is really great.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to that is, sex sells, right? So sex sells the products of advertisers, sex sells the drugs that these companies are pushing. Doesn't make it right, but yeah, it's a serious problem.
When we talk about this business of how to get together and whether or not, and start with small groups that learn to support each other and work as community. Václav Havel died recently, a dissident and the first post-communist premier or prime minister of the Czech Republic, and a man I admired deeply. So I went back and I started reading some of his stuff recently. He wrote an essay in 1978. You have to understand, and it was about how totalitarianism works. It's called, the title of the essay was called The Power of the Powerless. And it was an essay first that explained that totalitarianism isn't a dictatorship, that we're all complicit in this, that they have developed structures now that have us all buy in. It's not what you think. That's one. Two, it's going to end. This is 1978. Nobody had any right to hope in 1978 that totalitarianism was going to end in Eastern Europe. It is going to end, he said, and it's going to end because even though we're all complicit now, inside each one of us is a reservoir of truth that understands that this system is a lie and that it's destructive. And someday, as long as we keep that truth alive in ourselves, we will all come together, and this. And I think it's extraordinary that that piece was.
Should I stand up? Hi, my name is Leah. I was wondering if, I don't know if I'm allowed to stand up or not. I just stood up because everyone was quiet for a second. Y'all keep talking about, I personally have also had a lot of trouble with workplace sexism. I'm not going to talk about that, but just, you're not alone. Where do we find these mentors that everyone's talking about? I'm interested, I don't know if I could find one in my field, because I'm a musician. I find in Chapel Hill and just in general, it's really hard to be a female musician, like a female like songwriter. I mean, obviously, the songwriters represented generally are not female. Women are not in bands that often and stuff like that. As a music major, there's a lot of classical musicians who are female, but as like a independent, self-employed musician, if you will, I'm pretty alone. I was wondering, clearly there are mentors in all of these fields that I just don't know about, but where do we find those? And she was wondering that too. Like, who do we go to find like a mentor? And yeah, what does a mentor do also? I just think that would be really cool to be helpful to lots of people.
Yeah, okay.
Got it.
Good question. I think for fields that are so isolating, you need to network in whatever novel ways you can think of. And I've been seeing a lot of long-distance mentorship lately with people who are in isolated countries or in isolated fields who just find someone who they admire and reach out to them. And I think one of the incredible things is when someone responds. You send out an email maybe to 3 or 4 female songwriters that you find somewhere in the world, and you send them an email saying, hey, I'm kind of on my own out here in Chapel Hill, I'm kind of looking for some guidance. And surprisingly, people, sometimes they respond. And that's always a good sign, that people who respond actually have some interest in mentorship. But if you really are in a field where there's not a circle of people here to sort of draw from, then you have to be more creative in reaching out that way. And that would be my recommendation. Got one in the middle here. Nat.
Well, there's one lady with a mic.
Oh, yeah, we've got a woman with a mic.
As like an addendum to her question, how do you find a mentor if you don't have a specific field or anything you're in, if you're just like a person, a person that needs someone to talk to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that I would challenge you to do is to reach out to, again, if there's no one in your industry that you could reach out to women that share some of the same value system that you do, you like some of what they are talking about or that they've written. Reach out to those women. I have a high school teacher that's a mentor to me, and some things that I deal with in my workplace, I bounce them off her. She's not in the industry, she's not in my field, but she still lends a lot of credibility when it comes to sort of how to conduct myself as a woman in a male-dominated environment.
All right, so most of y'all are UNC-Chapel Hill students, maybe, or just community members in the area. Oh, I'm Sarah Catherine. Also, there are progressive environments, specifically feminist environments, and I don't know if consciousness raising and community building and plugging are mutually exclusive, but there is an on-campus group, Feminist Students United. They meet Wednesdays at 7:30 in Die 301. And not only do we appreciate diverse perspectives on just politics in general, but we are a community of feminists who very much want to talk and organize, and we're here. Just talk to someone, yeah, or come to Die 301 at 7:30 next Wednesday, and every Wednesday after that. Bye.
And then the next one. Thanks for that plug. Is Ruchita in the room? No. Because apparently the other thing is there are discussion circles that are happening around the triangle, built around misrepresentation. And she was going to come tonight and talk to us about them, but we don't see her. So what we'll do is we'll post that information on the misrepresentation. If you just Google Facebook misrepresentation UNC, you'll find our Facebook page, and we'll put information up there about some of these discussion circles that'll be coming up in the community. Do you need to say something? Oh, yeah. So 2 more things before we close down. 3 more things. First off, panel, let's thank the audience for being here. Thank you, audience. And audience, let's thank the panel for being here. Thank you for being here. And let's all thank Kristen and her team for putting this event together today. And if you're around campus over the next couple days for National Eating Disorders Awareness Week, tomorrow night, Memorial Hall, I'm disoriented, close, next door somewhere, is the Greek Groove. So the sororities are all putting dances together, and they're doing a dance contest, and I get to judge. So that's a really fun time. I was there last year, and all proceeds go to the UNC Eating Disorders Program. Tuesday, on the 28th at 5:30, we'll be in the pit with the Great Jeans giveaway and foods, games, and events. And then I'm going to be doing a reading and a mirror project. We're going to have the mirror will be in residence at 6 o'clock at the bookstore on Tuesday, and we're trying to take pictures of 1,000 faces in the mirror. Frank's been done. Stephanie's been done. And so be there, come, play with the mirror, be part of the mirror project, and watch that project just grow and grow and grow. And then after that, we're going to have live music, activities, prizes, all sorts of fun things to raise awareness for eating disorders. So once again, thank you all for being here today. Wait, Margie's waving her hand. Oh, Margie wants to know where you can get cool t-shirts. Are we going to have some more t-shirts made?
We actually have some extra. We actually have 4 extras. So first come, first serve. If you want to come up here, then we could talk about getting a shirt.
That's not as exciting as like if you have new Nikes in the store and people just storm that. Have a nice Sunday evening, everybody. Bye-bye.